All right, we're live and excited today to be joined by Victoria Carrington. We're going to be doing this as part of Tech Moms for what we call Better Way Thursday, but we're doing it on a Tuesday today. But it's always good every day to have these types of conversations. We got connected through a mutual friend, Summer. So thank you, Summer, to making this introduction. And as I had a conversation with Victoria, she was super passionate about getting involved and working with our students and alumni as they make their own career pivots. And she started to share some of her background and story. And I'm like, we need to share this with the world. I love your story. I'm excited to be able to get into this incredible journey we've had and the power of what we call the power of pivoting, right? In making just shifts and where that can lead us. You just never know. I talk about this a lot with our students on sometimes you get this little spark inside and you're not sure whether to move forward, or we let fear or some of these things prevent us from making major shifts in our life, but leaning into that. And so I'm excited to hear about your story. We're going to spend most of the time hearing from you, Victoria. I promise. We want to hear from you. Um, but really sharing kind of your journey, both from a professional and personal side of what your this journey has been for you. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you start wherever you want to start from. First of all, on sharing your journey from moving from a biochemist into biotech law, like major shift there. So let me just turn it over to you to get us started here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Trina. I'm super excited to be talking with you today to have this discussion. As you're saying, sometimes we let the fear or the unknown keep us back from things, and I just think it's important to have more of these conversations.
Yes.
So thank you so much for providing this opportunity. We have up here some photos, and so maybe this is a good place to start. I, growing up, always wanted to study science. I loved that ever since in the 6th grade, we got the opportunity to build little solar cars and do a bunch of stuff with renewable energy. And that was it for me. That was like the coolest thing. I got to build things. I remember us doing an experiment where we built lava lamps. And it was just the first time that I really was like, wait, this is fun.
Yeah.
You got to build things. You got to see reactions going on. And then throughout high school, getting to like continue to foster that love of chemistry in particular. And so then as going into college, it was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I thought for sure that I wanted to be a chemical engineer. That was my decided path. And then I started talking to a bunch of chemical engineers. I had the opportunity to go visit Purdue University, talk to a bunch of chemical engineers, and they're like, hey, yeah, we work for oil companies. And one of them's like, I work for a paint company. And I was like, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the path for me. And so I had the opportunity when I started college. I started at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. That's where I grew up, right there in Laie, Hawaii. They didn't actually have chemical engineering as a major. And so at the time I was like, okay, I will do the next closest thing, and that's biochemistry. And I will start down that path because that's what's available to me. And then I'll switch to chemical engineering later. That was my game plan. But then as soon as I was in biochemistry, I was like, wait a second, I love this. This is so cool. And so I stopped being an engineer, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that came around because while I was an undergrad, I still got to do a lot of research with chemical engineers. And so I feel like even though that wasn't my officially declared major, right, like still finding ways to do what I loved, I feel like if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a scientist, even if that's not literally your job title or your declared major, there's still ways to be an engineer and to be a scientist and to pursue those. So the pictures up here, that's me as a, young undergrad working in a biochemistry lab. And then on the left is an atomic force microscope. That's what my research was focused on, was trying to figure out how to use that. And so the image that you're seeing there on what is on the right side of the screen, at least for me, it's like a nano etched surface. And so the ability to use the atomic force microscope to see that pattern that got etched, I mean, that's not something you can see with the human eye by any means. And
it's like a big toy. You know what know, it's interesting from what you were just sharing with me about early on getting introduced to something that created that spark, like we were talking about, of like, hey, this is interesting to me. And I had a similar journey where I played with, I created motorized cars for my Barbies when I was little. And sometimes when I
I
go
love
and speak to like elementary schools or high schools, I always like to talk about, think about the things you played with when you were growing up, because it's a good indicator of what career you might want to have. But I love fashion, right? I love Barbies, but I love to build things and engineer motorized cars for my Barbies, right? But it's like it's in you, and it's just part of that discovery process of going through and trying different things, right? Of finding your path into what this might be from an engineering and science perspective. It's fun to go, okay, you had toys when you were little, but now look at this big toy you get to play with as well.
Right, absolutely. And I love that you said that, because again, I think that's exactly right. When it came to biochemistry, I always had in the back of my mind, right, I love makeup. Maybe that's something
Yeah.
to pursue. And so, just different avenues. I feel like sometimes we're like, oh, our job title is the end all be all of our personalities. And so sometimes, right, like my little LinkedIn motto is biochemist turned attorney.
Uh-huh.
And I love that. I think it's an easy way to convey who and what, like who I am, what I do. But also sometimes I'm like, wait, there are so many more things to me
There
than
are.
a biochemist and just an attorney. And so also holding space for that, and having room to acknowledge in ourselves that we are more than just our jobs.
Yeah, it's an and. You can be this and this, right? It's not an or. So I love that. So you made this journey, you found your path, right? And you were going down this path. You thought this is the path for me.
Right. Yeah.
How long before you pivoted again? Like, kind of maybe what was the next thing there from school?
For sure. Sometimes I almost joke that, I pivoted at, the last moment I could have in my undergrad. I had the MCAT flashcards and was taking practice tests. I was like going to use my biochemistry degree to go to medical school,
Mhm.
because as a biochemistry major, felt like there were two options. You could get a PhD and
Mhm.
be a biochemist, or you could go to medical school and you could become a doctor. And so it was like,
Yeah.
which one of these you'd like to do, and spend the rest of your life doing
Yeah.
that. And so fortunately, I had a roommate, um, Malia, who was at BYU Law when I was finishing up my undergrad. So I transferred from BYU Hawaii, came here to Utah in
Mhm.
2015, and then was at BYU Provo
Mhm.
until 2019. And so while I was there, I was very much like, again, pre-med, shadowing doctors, trying to work in clinics, all of that. But I had this roommate, and she was like, hey, there's this thing. It's called patent law. And again, we're talking about sparks. That really was a spark, a huge spark in my life, because I just didn't know that was a thing. I
Yeah.
didn't know patent law was a field. I didn't know patent attorney was a job you could have. Like just the exposure to things I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm the first lawyer in my family. And so, you know, my mom's best friend Tara, she's a lawyer, and so like she's been super instrumental in being someone there to teach me about the law and made me feel like I could also become a lawyer. But
Mhm.
navigating this desire to become a patent attorney was very new. And so as I was working on pivoting into law, when I was still like med school is the route for me, but here's now this idea, this little nudge that like maybe patent law is something I would be good at and want to do. I started by shadowing law students. That
Oh, I
seemed
love
like a
that.
really accessible thing to do. It wasn't quite as intimidating or scary as going and shadowing actual patent
Yeah.
attorneys. Like I didn't want to bother them or waste their time.
Yeah.
And so I started with law students. I lived really close to the BYU Law School, and basically talked to some other law students who were interested in intellectual property law. And so I went and talked to them, and it sounded great. I was like, wait, you mean to tell me I don't have to spend 6 years to get a PhD
Yeah.
and learn one thing and be an expert in this one niche thing, and nobody else wants to like hear about, um, which I shouldn't say too many bad things about PhD,
Yeah.
because my husband's currently working on a biotech. Um,
So you're like, I could go more school. You have like option A or B, and you're like, neither. I'm going to just pivot over here and look at law. But what I love about what you're saying about the shadowing, we, as we do tech transitions for students that are going through our programs, one of the things, or if they're looking at a new career and they're trying to do this discovery process, right? Which is what you went through of like, let me just go see. I've now been introduced. I have this new idea, which is part of the awareness of just all the opportunities that are out there, which is part of what we do at Tech Moms. But once you go, we ask them to go do informational interviewing, which is less scary. Like to your point, it's easier to go and say, hey, I'm really interested in this job. Can I just come talk about your journey? Because people love to talk about themselves. Like sometimes we feel like we're bothering people, but people like to share their journey. They like to know that they motivated maybe somebody else to get into the same profession. And so it's a little less scary. It's a little easier to go and shadow somebody and just say, is this something I want to do? And it may be like, yeah, I'm in, or maybe not, right? It's a safe way to do it.
Right. And just getting your feet wet. That's what I felt like helped throughout my transition was talking to law students, kind of learning some of the lingo, knowing what might be good questions to ask. And so, yeah, from there, I went and shadowed, some actual patent attorneys up. I was living in Provo still, but I came up to Salt Lake City and visited and shadowed some patent attorneys. And that was really helpful also to get them perspectives, because a lot of the people I had met starting out, they were engineers. That's fairly common. You are an engineer and then you go into being a patent attorney. And so I was worried, as someone in the life sciences, it was okay. There was this, I don't want to call it a rumor because, to some degree it's true, but sometimes it's like, oh, you need a PhD in life sciences if you also want to be a patent attorney. And so I was like, oh, do I need to get a PhD and go to law school in order to like make this career pivot? And that seemed scary and intimidating. And so that was the helpful thing about, like you're saying, like you just talk to people and they're willing to share
the reality. And
so I talked to another patent attorney who had a life sciences background, did not have a PhD, and talked about, yes, there are some challenges with that, but also it's something that you can do. And navigating, like going into it, not just like ignoring the reality, but also not like letting that fear cut you off. Because for me personally, it was like, okay, again, I didn't want to spend 6 years on a PhD to then pivot into law. I knew and was passionate already about wanting to, draft patents and be in that space. And so it was like, well, let's dive in head first, go study for the LSAT, go to law school.
Wow. So it was more, what's good is it's more of an informed decision rather than just a decision that you have to go and learn the hard way. Like you knew what you were getting into by saying, okay, I'm just going to go do the LSAT. It can be done, understanding the challenges, being informed about it, and then making the decision to move forward. And I think that gives you a little bit more emphasis and focus, knowing that that's the decision point that you were taking there.
For sure. Yeah. I wanted to make sure that I was going into it. And then also the other side of it, the thing that I wanted to explore before, again, I did jump kind of feet first, head first, whatever, like all in on the LSAT. But once I graduated, I ended up graduating actually in December of 2019. And so in the early part of 2020, before the COVID pandemic hit, I actually went and got a job working for Judge Romney at the Provo Justice Court. I wanted to make sure, if patent law wasn't the right type of law, I didn't want to feel like I spent 3 years in law school and did every other type of law. And so I wanted to get experience with city prosecutors and public defenders and trial attorneys and judges and, like, I want to say traditional law as well. And again, I feel like there was space for me to do that, and there is space for lots of people. Like, again, I wanted to make sure I liked law, but then I'm so glad that, I landed where I landed, and that there is the space to, blend traditional law with technology, be in the life sciences, but also get to learn new tech. Like, I just feel like there's so many opportunities to do that. But yeah, I'm grateful that that was just like an internship.
I was going to ask, was that an internship? Because internships are really powerful. I think what I've seen is the graduates that I've had that have been able to get internships, it first reinforces a better understanding of what they're getting into and how to navigate and they get hired like super fast. I think that in this tech space, though, the internships typically are a challenge in finding them because they're created primarily for college students, not non-traditional learners. So we've had to kind of navigate that. But getting an internship, even if you're making less pay, sets you up for future success. And I think sometimes we have at least the conversations that I've had of like, oh, but it's so much more less than what I've been doing, these pivots. Sometimes you have to take a step back to be able to propel forward. But I'm glad to hear that you did do this internship and that it kind of helped reinforce your decision on where you wanted to go.
Right. I knew at the end of the day, okay, even if I pivoted into law and I left everything about science behind me, except for maybe as like a hobby, it was like, okay, I do love other aspects of being an attorney, being in the courts. So that was a really good experience. And then that got cut short by the pandemic. Trials weren't held in person, all of that. So, yeah. But from there, that was when I was applying for law school, got into law school, and then having this love of science, though, like weaved through my story, really helped because what people might not know about law school is that first year of law school, you don't get to pick any of your classes. It's not like I want to study something, I want to take this interesting class. It is like, here are the topics. They're very like structured traditional law. It's the things that are going to be tested on the bar exam at the end of the day. And so, that was something that was hard because here I went from spending 4 years as an undergraduate, standing up and conducting experiments in a lab. And then suddenly it was, sit down every night and read hundreds of pages of case law and write. And, it was contracts and constitutional law and criminal law and all these things where I was like, I didn't come here to practice any of these.
And so feel like, though, it was never lost time, meaning, do you feel like it benefited you to be able to go through some of that structure? Or like, I know this is a hard one to answer because and there's a reason I'm asking this. I'll maybe tell you that first. Sometimes when people go through, let's say I'm moving into computer science or engineering and they get into classes and they're like, oh my gosh, if this is what I have to do every day of my life, I don't want to do this. But it's kind of like a prerequisite to say, okay, I did it, but that's not the day-to-day, right? It's not what you're going to be doing every day of your job, but it's kind of part of the process of getting to where you want to be and knowing you got to just get through that. Do you feel like, I mean, at this point, you've got through it. So I'm assuming, you didn't quit at this point. Do you feel like it was, beneficial to go through those things you wouldn't normally have done or push you into areas you wouldn't have gotten into otherwise?
I think so. I think there is an amount of respect for the process that you have to have.
Right.
And I think it was helpful. And in some sense, I almost now appreciate it. Like when I was in the thick of it, it was very like, why
am I doing?
Do I have to do all these things to become a patent attorney? But on the other side, it was very validating that once I became a second and a third year law student, and I actually got to take courses focused on patents and trademarks and copyrights and the type of law that I practice now. And it was like, wow, yeah, I do love this more than my other classes. And so it was good to have exposure to those other things. They always say that law school is there to teach you to think like a lawyer. And I think that's good. Yeah. Generally, problem solving, being able to write well, and legal writing, again, like I basically had only written a lab report for the 4 years prior to law school. And so coming to law school is like a very different experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Than maybe if I had, say political science or English or something else prior to law school.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good experience to get the exposure in law school to other types of law. Granted, I also knew it was interesting because I knew I wanted to be a patent attorney, and so that comes with having to go to law school and become a lawyer. Whereas there is another job. There is something called a patent agent. If you have a technical background, a degree in engineering or hard science, you can actually sit for the patent bar and become a U.S. Patent and Trademark Office registered practitioner. And so you can be a patent agent. You can represent people. They're just with the USPTO. You can represent them in court to do any other, attorney things. And so I knew that was an option. And so I did also go into this knowing that I'd chosen to pursue this becoming an attorney path, not just becoming a patent agent. And so that also helped at the end of the day. And then I think one of the life-saving things for me as a first-year law student was the University of Utah. That's where I did law school. They have a program called the Pro Bono Initiative, and it's a pro bono legal clinic. They have different ones. And so after, surviving that first semester, then you're eligible and you're able to volunteer there. And that really was the thing that helped me, because even though it wasn't related to patent law at all, it felt so validating and helpful to get to actually
do it.
To clients, address problems, putting, a face to the practice of law. And so I think that really helped, and finding that thing for you, whatever that is, as you're pivoting. Again, like you're saying, you might have those moments and those periods and seasons of your life where you're like, ooh, like, I don't love this. If this is going to be every day, like, maybe that's a good indication that that's not the right thing. But I think sometimes, recognizing that there are aspects of it that might not be your favorite, but there are things to love. There are things to enjoy, emphasizing more of that. And so, I threw myself into pro bono work.
You got to keep the big picture in mind, right? Of like, okay, this isn't going to be day to day. This is just a short-term stepping stone to knowing that there's a big picture by doing this. I have the same conversation with my kids, right? Because they've said that same thing. Like, why am I having? I'm never going to do this again in my career. And I'm like, you just need the piece of paper. You're going big picture, piece of paper that's going to get you to being able to do the things you want to do every day, right? And so you have to understand the differences there of, is this what I'm going to be doing? Like, overall, this isn't going to get me where I want to go. And then it is going to get me where I want to go, and knowing the difference there. Did you have, as you were making this pivot and did you have mentors along the way that you would call on or talk to help you kind of navigate? I mean, you did the job shadowing originally, but did you have them as you went along the journey?
I did. I mean, so in undergraduate, primarily my mentors were the people that I worked for. I was a chemistry TA. I owe a lot of gratitude to Dr. Jeffrey Macedoni at BYU. He was my boss for many, many years as I was a TA. And he was really helpful also for talking through that conversation of, should I get a PhD? Should I go to med school? And then once law came into the picture, I remember one year for Christmas, he had 3D printed out something for each of his TAs as like a Christmas ornament. And so he printed out a little gavel, a 3D printed gavel ornament for me. And that was really special to have this recognition of like, like you're doing this thing. And, again, as you're in the thick of it, it feels like, you're leaving behind science to go into law. But I felt like he always encouraged me. He made it feel like it was achievable to continue to be a scientist and to pursue law. And so having that support was really helpful.
I think you sharing with others what your goals were and what you were looking to do helps reinforce it, right? Because then it also drives some accountability of what you're doing and why, and be able to help you process, what you're doing and kind of getting committed to that new future you're creating.
For sure. And also at BYU, Jennifer Nielsen, Associate Dean for the College of Physical Mathematical Sciences, she was in charge of something called the Women in STEM Council. And I actually was a Department of Chemistry, Biochemistry representative on that. And so that was a cool, unique experience where we basically got together and were able to like advise the deans on women in STEM. These are issues we're facing, particularly at BYU. How do we address some of those things? And so when she found out that I wanted to pursue patent law, she actually had a friend who was going to be presenting at BYU Law School who was a lawyer, female attorney. And so she invited me. I was like invited to this, whatever presentation that I didn't know existed and I wouldn't have been invited to otherwise. But I think that's right. As I was willing to share what I was trying to do and wanted to do, people were so willing to help.
Yeah.
I think if I hadn't said anything, if people didn't know that I was thinking about law school, then
they don't know how to help.
Come up.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And going back on your comment of like, I didn't want to disturb people. I hear that a lot. But people want to be part of your success story, right? They want to be part of your journey. Like, don't discount individuals' willingness to come help. And if they decide not to help, that's with them. And if they do, why not put it out there and that, share like, here's what I'm thinking and why, and let people help you navigate this pivot process, right? That I think, this is such a critical time. I'm going to kind of step out from your story for just a moment, because I think what I'm seeing right now is more and more people are going to be going through this pivot, maybe not intentionally, because there's such a workforce disruption happening right now that it's going to force people to have to make this same journey that you did intentionally, right? Of like, oh wait, my job no longer exists. What's going to be the next pivot thing? And some of the things that you're sharing, I think, are very valuable for many people right now that are going to be kind of forced into this pivot process and moving forward in it. So, just kind of a thought that came to mind right now of your journey. A lot of people are going to be or are going through right now. So you got to this point where you're in law school, you're getting towards the end of it. How did it wrap up and as you made your internship and you're now pivoting, what was that next step to be able to actually get into the job and kind of maybe talk us through that process?
Yeah. So like I had mentioned before, starting second year, third year of law school, then I was able to take more specialized classes, get more connected with people in the intellectual property space. I think that's also something that I miss now as an actual practicing professional. Is back when I was a student, people just let me go to conferences and events for free all the time. Like they were just so happy to have someone there. Now I still think they're happy to have people there and have me there. But, I really feel like students have like a superpower. Like if you want to get into something, you say that I'm a student or you're willing to volunteer to go to something and help us volunteer. Like I really feel like I had access to a lot of different, very cool opportunities as a student.
Yeah.
And so while I was in law school, though, so another one of my mentors, important in my path, was Professor George Contreras at the University of Utah Law School. He's an IP professor, and I ended up being his research fellow while I was in law school. Mm-hmm. And there are a bunch of different intellectual property related projects we worked on, but we ended up actually collaborating with a journalist, David Ciernosky, to write this article that you're seeing in the picture. And this had to do with the patent landscape surrounding assisted reproductive technologies. And that would include in vitro fertilization and a newer technique called in vitro gametogenesis. So IVF, IVG, mm-hmm. All of the intellectual property around those. And so this was such a cool experience because having a mentor who was on the IP side of things, and this was a legal research project, but this was also very much in the science. And it felt like I got to use my biochemistry background and understanding. I was reading actual patents related to this technology to do this. And we ended up publishing this pictures from Nature Biotechnology, which was such a cool thing. I thought when I graduated with my undergraduate in biochemistry and pivoted into law, like, oh, there goes any chance of me publishing in a science
Mhm.
journal, maybe a law review, maybe something like that. I'll go publish in traditional lawyer type, venues. But this was cool. This was, what I would have done if I was a scientist, would be published in a scientific journal.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool. And then I got to go present this research at an intellectual property scholars conference that was at Stanford Law. So I did that the summer in between my second and third year of law school, basically.
I love it. And what's great about this is sometimes I call it the commit and shift, the same pivot, right? Of committing to a path. And sometimes individuals will feel like, well, if I commit to this path and I get 3 years down the road and then I shift later, it's lost time. Like there's a fear of moving forward because it may not be the right decision yet. But think about all the things in those 4 years you did in biochemistry that weren't lost, right? It wasn't lost time, and applied later on in being able to do the work you're in publishing this. And it just comes full circle. Sometimes you don't see it when you're in it and you're moving forward and you're like, oh God, did I lose that time and effort and experience? And it's never lost. It always comes up in some way of being applicable. And so being willing to say, okay, I'm going to pick a path, I'm going to commit to that one path, but it doesn't mean I can't ever shift again. I can't ever move to something else because I don't want to lose that time. It's your path connected both of those things so well together in this example.
For sure. And I think there's such power in that, in owning your story, recognizing that your background is yours. Your path is going to be unique. Again, if you choose to pivot, if you're forced to pivot, recognizing that there are things that you've learned and experienced that you can take with you no matter where you end up or find yourself. And so that was a big aspect of being there. I did my law firm, now Mashaw Brennan, they did hire me to be a first year, in between my first year and second year, I worked for them as what's known as a summer associate. And so that also was a big shift for me. When you're a law student, it kind of feels like that's just it. Like that's your whole life. You're a law student. You're meant to sit down, read the books, and write the exams. And that was it. And so then actually having that first summer job, an opportunity to start in patent law. I mean, it was funny because I'd gone to law school to become a patent attorney. And then once I was working in it that first summer, it really was that recognition of, I don't know anything about patent law. My biochemistry background didn't teach me patent law.
Yeah.
And my, first year of law school taught me nothing about patent law. And yet here I was. And so I definitely appreciate, their willingness to take a chance on me. And I think, sometimes it's recognizing that, again, there were different things I did in law school to position me, right? Yeah. I joined the intellectual property law student association and worked as like a first year class representative for that. I had my biochemistry background. I tried to position myself to be apparent that I was going towards this goal of being a patent attorney. And so I'm grateful that, they gave me that chance that first summer job.
You learn so much more in the job, right? The experience is so critical. About a year ago, my co-founders and I sat down and we're like, okay, let's talk about what our mission and goals are again for the organization. And really what we got to is our mission is to teach people to learn how to learn, right? It's not one specific technology. It's not one specific discipline, because things change and pivot so much and you learn on the job. And so kind of reinforces what you're saying about learning how to learn is kind of what you're doing within your schooling. But then once you get in the job, you're like, okay, and then it might be something completely different, or you're learning so much more, but you're willing to go, okay, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to move forward. A lot of times I'll see individuals that get stuck in what I call the learning wheel, and they're just always feeling like they need to be overly prepared before they get into the job. and trying to get out of that, knowing that like, okay, let me just get the job, because then I'm going to learn so much more once I'm in the role, and whatever experience that provides me is education as well. And so I love that you're like putting these things together for me. You're setting things up so well for me, Victoria. Thank you. Being able to provide like all of these things, even like what you're talking about, the importance of networking and creating connection as you went through your pivoting journey, how important that is to get out there and network and meet people and learn from them. Like the relationship part of any career pivot is so important as you're moving through this. So was the summer role that you took, was that a temporary one that turned in full time, or how did that transition work for you?
So it started out temporary. So I was here for my first summer. That was, I think, 10 weeks.
Mhm.
And then went back to law school. And then, so they gave me an offer to come back for my second summer. And so that was really exciting, because also at this time, at the end of my first year of law school, is actually when I met my husband.
Mhm.
And so going into law school, I didn't necessarily know, I wasn't committed to staying in Utah. I
Right.
didn't grow up here. Lots of people had told me, they're like, oh, patent law, you're going to want to end up in Silicon Valley or in Boston, maybe Texas, like
Yeah.
the bigger IP market. And so I really think it's funny how things worked out, because I accepted that initial summer job like the week before I met my husband. And
Mhm.
so then we started dating. We got married while I was a second year law student. He was a second year med student at the time, which is a wild time to like plan a wedding in the middle of graduate school.
Yeah.
And so, but I loved it. I loved that I had this job lined up for that second summer, came back. And that's when things really, I felt like, started falling into place. Because, yeah, that first summer was like, I knew nothing about patent law. And then at least I got some exposure that summer, went back to school, took some classes actually in patent law and IP related topics, came back that second summer. There were still tons and tons of things for me to learn then. There are still tons of things for me to learn now.
Yeah.
But at least then, I had like this additional year of experience, and then it was nice to kind of come back and it was like, oh, that's what that thing was last summer.
Yeah.
They have this whole summer training program that I think is phenomenal and very helpful. And so, yeah, getting to go through all those trainings the second time, it was like, oh, I get it. That's what that thing
Now
was.
it clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. Having those like multiple exposures, I think, to different things, because sometimes, with a 10-week summer job or an internship, it's not like you're going to get exposure to everything that
Mhm.
job possibly entails. And
Yeah.
so I think, my big takeaways from internships and doing things over summer jobs is really just getting exposure to enough things and realizing, do I like this type of work? And also, I think actually super critically is, do I like the people I work with?
Yeah.
That I think was a key factor in my decision to stay with my firm. And so, yeah, after the 2 summers, I got an offer to come full time once I had
Okay.
finished law school, passed the bar,
Yeah.
all of that, became an attorney. And so this next photo, this is me after taking the patent bar. This is when I became an attorney, like a patent attorney. So I took the Utah State Bar in July 2023, and then I took the patent bar in January 2024. And
Amazing.
I feel very accomplished this photo, because I knew at the time, no one else knew at the time, but I was actually 8 weeks pregnant when I took the patent bar.
Oh,
And so I feel like I went through this experience kind of with my son,
yeah.
like
He's
we
part of
knew
it.
for sure.
Pre-beginning even. Yeah.
Yeah.
From as you move through. And I love that, because a lot of times we get into our career discussions and we're like, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this, but we don't talk about our personal lives and what's going on, and that have we all have lives outside of like our work and our career and our school and all the things that are going on, and the challenges that can be coming up for us when we're making these transitions and pivots, right? That can either derail us, or we work through and power through them, right? We kind of have a choice there, and that you move forward and complete it, and said, okay, I'm going to make this work with the life work that's happening at the same time. So tell me a little bit more about kind of you finished, you took the job, and you have a newborn right now.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So this
4 months, right?
he's 4 months old now. Here's him in his little patent pending onesie. And the picture there of me is from my first day back after maternity leave. And so just this experience of like we said before, right, being a biochemist and an attorney. Now it's again, you can be and
a mom.
and a mom, adding
and
that. And I love it. I knew for myself, you know, me and my husband, it was like, okay, he's still in school, he's finishing, and you know, he's working on an 8-year graduate program. So it was like, okay, that's, yeah, you know, he's going to be in school for another hot minute.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, I'm done with law school. I've passed the bar. It felt like the right time for us to start, you know, growing our family. And so navigating that, and having, fortunately, like lots of conversations with other female attorneys and having mentors. You know, we mentioned right at the start of this, the way we got connected, having Summer Jensen, you know, having a mentor. She and I got connected through Silicon Slopes Women in Leadership. And so having people there, I actually met Summer, like, I think it was the day before I got induced. And so like 9 months pregnant, but having her there to help me, you know, we met via Google Meets and did virtual chats, like for the whole time I was on maternity leave.
Yeah.
And so having those resources and just trying to navigate this new thing. But,
yeah,
you know, as we were saying, there's recognizing that, you know, day to day now is still kind of crazy. Like him being 4 months old, right? Like my sleep's not very consistent. I was terribly nauseous and sick during my pregnancy. So navigating all these things during my first year as a full-time attorney, you know, but I think it's recognizing that people are willing to give you grace, and you have to give yourself some grace.
Absolutely.
A lot of the time. And then also that, you know, you're stronger than you think you are. I guess I you know, didn't realize how difficult it was going to be, which is funny. You know, I feel like as mentally prepped as I could be, having a medically trained husband, you know, I was like, we've got this. You know, I used to work, actually, while I was an undergraduate, I also worked as a campus security guard, and I worked from midnight to 8 in the morning. So I was like, I'm good. I know what sleep deprivation is. And it still surprised me, having a newborn, just like
disrupt everything
in the world, how different it would be, but also how simultaneously it's so hard, but it's so enjoyable. Like I've almost surprised myself. I didn't realize how much I was going to love being a mom until I really had this new life in my life. And so that's been kind of cool for me. But
I love it.
Adding on, again, more things that you love, like not leaving behind. I think it's kind of like my journey's been gathering all these good things, you know. I love science, keeping that, loving law, keeping that. Now I have, you know, my son, and I love him, and having a family and keeping that, and not just letting life get off balance, right? You talk a lot about work-life harmony, and I think that's such a key part of this is recognizing, you know, your whole self and bringing that to your job and to your life.
Yeah. And I love that you said it right. You said life work harmony. I'm very intentional about life first, right? But not losing the work, because the work is such a part of who we are as well. Like it like I would have a hard time letting go of my work, right? I love my family, I love my personal life, but work is such a big part of me. It would be like something would feel like it was lost. And so how do you find harmony between all of those? And it sounds like, and it's a discovery process. It's not like, oh, I've arrived and I have harmony continually for every day and minute. It does not work that way. It's like a continual journey towards, and everybody's version of what life work harmony is like is different. Like what works for you is probably not the same. Like, and there's no judgment. I think we got to drop the, like, how somebody should or shouldn't be doing it. Right. And so, you know, maybe there's a few tips and tricks of like what's worked for you as you've made this transition? Is there anything that comes top of mind for you as you've started to move into this more life and family side and make helping it, find harmony in your work? Is there anything that you found that works well for you?
Kind of similar to what we were saying about, having people aware of your goals and they're willing to help you. I think leaning into support, and I'm not perfect at this, and sometimes I'm not even good at this, but I took 6 weeks of maternity leave. My son wasn't able to start in daycare till he was 3 months old, right? That left 6 weeks where it was like, I'm back at work, my husband's at work.
Yeah.
We need someone to watch our baby. And so having support systems and recognizing it, it took some maneuvering, right? My mom was a massive help. I don't know how we would have done it without her, but she came and watched our son during the days for a lot of it. My mother-in-law also came up and, helped watch over the baby. So like having that support, having a community,
Support
people who are bringing
system,
us
for sure.
meals and being willing to like be honest about where we were at with things though, because I think, kind of the curse of being, I think, a professional, and I think women, maybe we take this harder, maybe it's just me, but it's like we want to come across as pulled together and we're on
have
top.
it all. I've got it all figured out. I'm taking
Right.
it all and doing it all, and I'm independent, right?
And
I think
so,
letting go and saying, hey, I need help.
yeah.
Okay.
Recognizing that, like,
need a husband.
postpartum, it was like, I can't get out of bed today. And I there was like a patent application I had been working on before I left on maternity leave. And I literally had to have this conversation with one of my supervising attorneys, because it really was like, not only can I not draft this patent application, I can't even open my inbox. Like, I'm so frazzled and sleep deprived. Like, the thought of opening up my work inbox literally is like gonna give me an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
And so just like, I can't handle this. And he was amazing. He's like, we've got this. And it really helped, also recognizing that like there are kindred spirits and there are allies, right?
Yeah.
Like the nature of patent law, because you do have like the STEM funnel plus the law funnel. Like, there aren't a lot of female patent attorneys, but knowing that a lot of the colleagues I work with have families, right? They've done it before. They've got 4, 5, 6 kids of their own. And so recognizing that, like, obviously my story is unique to me, but also there are a lot of things that people can relate to. They've been there, they know. And so just, again, like giving yourself some grace, letting people help you. That's been, I think, just super important. And so I'm trying to do more of that, because I always laugh, right? Like, I've got this LinkedIn presence, whatever it may be, and I try to, present myself a certain way to the world, but I'm like, man, if people just only knew, right? Like, my house is a wreck, and just trying to navigate newborn mom life and all of that. But again,
I love that you're sharing
finding the joy in the struggle, though, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the problem, is we feel like we need to hide that we're dealing with that. And the more we talk about it and we make it real, the more accepted it is. It's like, oh, I don't have to be perfect all the time. I can have bad days. Everybody does. I remember when I was in grad school, and they set us up in teams to be able to get through classes, which was great. I did my executive MBA at the U, and they did a great job of saying, look, for 2 years, you're not going to be perfect on point the whole time. You're going to need to lean on each other. And there were times where I had to reach out and be like, hey, I need help to get through this. And they reached out to me. And I think creating cultures and environments and work environments that say, hey, we need to be able to have a life first approach to our work environment so that everybody can get through successfully, because life is going to happen. And it's not just about parenthood, or like maybe you have like a family member, a parent that needs care, or some, it's just, let's make it more acceptable that we have lives, and be able to say, hey, I've got life happening right now. Let's figure out let's have a conversation how we can get through this. Right. So I love that you're able to do that within your work environment. I mean, it's incredible to be able to have an environment that supports that.
Absolutely. And I think what you were saying, right? You're not going to be on point every day for 2 years. You're not going to be perfect all the time, but still pressing forward. I think it's recognizing, if that's your expectation for yourself, you're like, I have to be perfect,
to be burned out,
then yeah, it's a path to disaster. And so, yeah, navigating being a mom, navigating being an attorney, just doing the best I can, and trying to find people that are in similar or the same situation. Again, sometimes it's harder than others, but
find your community.
There are lots of communities. I think Utah's got a lot of really great things. Like sometimes I do feel like I have to segment myself, but right there, I've got lots of great attorney friends. I've got lots of great people in the life sciences. I've got a lot of great new moms, and so getting to find those people in their kind of respective areas that then relate to me,
that can support,
helpful.
I think that outside of like the education and the skills that we do at Tech Moms, our number one thing is the community side that helps with retention in the pivot and the transition as they get into their career. We say once a tech mom, always a tech mom, because that community life doesn't stop once you're done with our program. This is an ongoing life journey, right, that we're all going through. And having the number of times I see comments, we use Slack and have this community channel, right, where people can go like, oh, I just had like the craziest day, or I don't know how to deal with this, or I need, like, being able to communicate and share that with others, and just have people come in and go, here's what, I don't know how to solve this for you, but here's some ideas, right? Or like just being able to know that you have that safe place to go, and creating that community behind you to be able to help and invest in that, right? Invest in that network and that community. You just never know where you're going to be able to help somebody else, or likewise. I think it's a great call out. We're at the end of our time. Unfortunately, this has gone really fast, Victoria.
It really has.
Your journey is amazing. I'm so grateful to you for sharing it. As we wrap up, is there any last advice you would give as you went through this pivot and transition that you would share out to our community?
I think the final takeaway that I'd like to emphasize is just that finding joy in the journey, that you can pivot and it can be scary. But I think there's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of exciting experiences ahead of you. And if you can kind of keep, your eyes on that, focused on that. And with that, to the Tech Moms community, something I wanted to bring up is, it's a slightly older statistic, but the one that I could find as of the end of 2019, the women inventor rate in the US is 12.8%. That means only 12.8% of inventors listed in patents are women. And I think that's far too low. And so I just, if you've got an idea, and, again, you can be an engineer, you can be a scientist. I think anyone can be an inventor. And I know so many women who are inventors, and I think they just, maybe if I can be any encouragement, that like you are an inventor, and to take your ideas seriously, and find joy in the creative, inventive aspects of what you do. I don't think you're just a mom. I don't think anyone's just a mom or just a woman, right? It's like we're all so many things. So yeah, I love being a biochemist and an attorney and now a mom, and finding joy in all those things. And so yeah, I would love, like, if that's my little soapbox I'm on, and I'd love to stay on, but like more female inventors, more women in STEM interacting with the patent system. If there's anything I could possibly do, even if it's just, if it's a pep talk, or if it's like actually connecting you to resources, I love staying connected. I try really hard to stay connected to like the BYU alumni, to the University of Utah alumni, to the life sciences community, to the tech community. I try to be everywhere all at once, and now being a new mom, I don't think I can keep that up. That's not sustainable for the life I'm in.
There's a time and place.
But yeah, if you ever see me anywhere out and about in like the Salt Lake community, I would love for people to say hi. And again, I'd love to be a resource for everyone.
I love that. So everybody's heard that now. Take all your ideas that have been sitting in the back of your mind write them down and start moving forward on them. I think that there's I'm with you, Victoria. I think that we muffle ideas, and there's so many great things that could be solved in this world if we could just get those ideas out of minds and onto the paper and supported, right? So bring those ideas forward, work on them, make them an active part. Because I hear all like, oh, I had this idea. I'm like, well, let's move it forward, right? Take action on it. So I love that as a final call to action for everyone. Wherever you're at on your journey is the right place to be. Keep moving forward on it. Keeping that big picture in mind as you move forward, and we're here to support. So Victoria, thank you so much for your time and effort and support for our organization and all that we're doing as well. If we can ever do anything on likewise, please let us know. So with that, we'll wrap it up today and let everybody get on with their days. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Take
for
care.